Welcome to the 3 Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, like the video, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. We got a special guest on the podcast. Hopefully, this isn't the last time, but please welcome Eric Vincent, a Detroit Pistons beat writer, a member of the Detroit media, and host on the Sports Rap radio waves. But Eric, feel free to fill in any gaps I missed.
You got it, man. That's about it. Yeah, I'm a Pistons beat reporter with Clutch Points. Just got kicked off on AM 1270 Sports Rap Radio, the very first all African American sports radio station. To kick that off in Detroit is huge, man. I'm really honored to be a part of it, and honored to be a part of this too, man. I'm a big fan of yours, dude. This is awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Man, I seriously appreciate that because, like, every time, like, someone has told me that, I'm like, dude, no way. Just me out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. I really appreciate that. But I am a fan of yours as well, man.
Oh, man. Look at we doing it good with the network speak right now. I like this.
But let's get into this. We had some news at the beginning a couple hours ago. The Detroit Pistons have hired Dennis Lindsey as the senior VP of basketball operation. Lindsey is credited for constructing the Utah Jazz era of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. For people confused about the role of Michael Blackstone, who was hired as the vice president of basketball operations, Omari Sankofa asked Langdon about Michael Blackstone. He said he's someone that understands the cap and has a big-time negotiation background. So I feel like Dennis Lindsey's role will have more to do with player acquisition, and Michael Blackstone will have more to do with contract negotiations. He did that cool incentive-friendly deal with Zion Williamson when he re-signed that extension. And I just got to say, I'm really impressed with Trajan Langdon, hiring guys that, in my opinion, are strengths in areas that he might consider weaknesses. And that, to me, is a sign of a real leader. But, Eric, what are your thoughts on this news by the Detroit Pistons?
Yeah, you hit it on the head, man. He has a clear goal in mind. He's very focused on filling out specific responsibilities in the front office. And they've been talking about doing this for a while. They talked a lot about that at the presser, which we'll get into, I'm sure, in a little bit. But he talked about wanting to be, orderly with assignments. And Gore's kind of talked about that as well, too. Like, he said that he wanted to have a leader with a true vision, and Langdon is showing what he wants to do. He's emphasized the importance of the roster, where leadership command is going to fall, and he's getting a lot of the guys that he wants from the front office, adding the pieces that he's added in the front office, going after someone as important as Lindsey to kind of be his second guy in command. I think it's going to be huge for him. I think he's a huge hire. He's seen success with Dallas, seen success with Utah, and bringing that to the Pistons, I think is going to be a big, big addition for them. They need this too, after coming off what we've seen over the past few years with the front office. So this is an A+ move for the Pistons right now, I believe.
Oh, I do too. And I don't want to hear anything from fans that are like, well, this is too many cooks in the kitchen. Who's going to be making the decisions? At the end of the day, it will still be Trajan Langdon, I believe, making all of the decisions. But, the thing that I always was worried about with Troy Weaver, I understand this is a guy that understood talent. He had an eye for players. I get that. But there were responsibilities in the front office that I felt like he was underqualified for. And Trajan Langdon might feel that way about himself. So he's bringing these guys in. That doesn't mean all of these dudes are going to be like, I'm going to overrule what Trajan Langdon's saying. He's just saying, dude, I need a helping hand in some of these other areas so I can focus on, leading this front office. But what are, if Piston, for fans that might reach out to you and say, hey, too many cooks in the kitchen, what would your response be to them?
These are smart cooks in the kitchen. So it's okay to have that, especially when they have responsibilities. Like you just spoke to it. Like when one's working with the cap, one's working with player development, one's working with scouting, and then he's the say-all voice that they're kind of coming to. Like it's not Tom Gores who has to be the voice, where granted, we would prefer to be somebody else. And Langdon seems like the more qualified voice to speak on that and thread all that together too. That's something else that they emphasize a lot at the presser. I don't really mind it. I understand the worry from Piston fans because of what we just experienced, but the names that they're adding and the vision that he's putting together in terms of what he wants to do, I think you should be very hopeful. I understand the concern, but Langdon is moving this thing in the right direction, considering the uphill battle that he has to deal with anyway. So I think he's doing a good job from the start, even with just little moves like this. I think he's really, really getting a good direction right here with his team.
No, I 100% agree. And Dennis Lindsey, he was one of the finalists for the job that Trajan Langdon now holds for the Detroit Pistons.
Right.
So I'll say it again. I think it's just a great move and a real sign of a leader to say, you know what, this guy was in the running with me. He's a smart mind. I could use him and he could help us build this team and basically rebuild it and restore this once great organization. So I'm 100% backing this move.
Yeah, this is something that has been on their radar for a while. Again, people laughed when Gore said at the presser, he said, maybe I put too much value in basketball. But I think even if you do put a lot of value in basketball, it doesn't mean that you have to be the leading voice to make those moves happen. You can put other people in position to emphasize your vision. And I think he's done a good job of doing that. I see Kuka Hill and Czar tweet out that Pistons putting a super team of a front office together. And it honestly kind of looks like that. Again, given their experience, even with Langdon working under David Griffin with the success that they had with the Pelicans, even when he was with the Nets, like he's had a very good reputation. And now putting those cooks in the kitchen with their specific responsibilities, I don't think we're going to see the problems that we've seen over the past few seasons. I think we're going to be in good shape. They're going to be in good shape.
I do too. I 100% agree with that. So 4 days ago, we got Trajan Langdon's introductory press conference. We got to meet him. And in my opinion, he provided a plan on how to rebuild the Detroit Pistons and restore them as one of the great franchises in professional basketball. But Eric, you were there. You got to talk to him. So I want to hear your thoughts on the Trajan Langdon press conference and what you took away from it.
Before we get to basketball, Pistons organization, y'all got to be better with the timing, man. I'm gonna speak for the fans in the base. These hour delays, man, that's not a good look. We got to be better than that. I love them. I respect you guys. I appreciate you. Thank you for letting me sit in there. But let's iron that out a little bit moving forward. Now, in terms of the presser itself, I walked away encouraged, and I think fans should as well. The first thing that I really liked, and again, Goris and Langdon were out together. Goris didn't run from the BS. He didn't run from the issues and the struggles that have been created up to this point. A lot of fans and people beat on him for last season where he said, hey, we're at least building the community. Like he's like trying to like push the narrative in a different direction. Like, bro, we don't care about that. So I appreciate him coming out and saying, look, we haven't been as good in free agency as maybe we should have been. We haven't been like the wins aren't there. The success isn't there. He even said, I know the narratives about me being maybe not as attached as I should be. And, people can have whatever view of that if you want. I appreciate him being honest at the very least to say, hey, things are not going right. We know that, and we're going to try to fix it. They didn't try to sell a false narrative. And like you said, Langdon is clearly here. It's not like the Monty Williams thing where we heard him say, hey, I'm here for this, and the money. Now people are questioning what his intentions are. I don't think we're seeing that with Langdon at all. He came out with a very clear vision, talked about the kind of players he wants to add, and then through his actions as well, hiring Lindsey, hiring Fred Vincent to the coaching staff, talking about like what he sees in terms of value with draft picks and how to take on contracts. Like he's speaking very directly. And I don't like when owners or coaches speak in like just like cliche metaphors. He's speaking with a clear, direct plan so everybody can be on the same page. I was very, very encouraged with what he said at that presser last week.
Yeah, I really thought like what Tom Gores did, like what you were saying, admitting his wrongs and basically just kind of coming clean with all of it. That was really great. And I know I've made fun of him as an owner, especially for the community thing. Like I thought that was kind of funny. And I'm not going to repeat a tweet that I saw on X at the time, but it was really funny. And I'll mention it to you after the show.
Yeah.
But anyways, like back to the basketball stuff though, some of the key takeaways that I wrote down were, when it came to team building and roster construction. It was sticking with the youth, continue to develop the young guys, surround the young guys with veterans that fit their skill set and that will help them grow. Taking on bad contracts with guys that can still provide something to a team. And then Trajan Langdon looking to bring in players that make Cade's life easier than focus on shooting. But from a basketball standpoint, team building, roster construction, what were your key takeaways from the press conference?
Yeah, he definitely mentioned that he didn't want to try to, like, he emphasized the necessity of bringing in some proven talent because, again, you can't keep relying on young players to just click and get it right away. That's not going to work, especially when you're a new front office, bringing in a new coaching staff. Patience is going to have to be, something that they emphasize on. So I did like him mentioning that and talking about that. I also liked him talking about Cade Cunningham and his view of him. Like, it was a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but a lot of mystery where he wanted to be kind of vague on like the young core. Like, some media members are asking him like, who you see as the young core, who do you see being here for the future? And he didn't really get into that too much. But while there's so much talk outside about Cade Cunningham and what his long-term fit is, he sees him as a focal point piece. And I liked hearing that from him because I'm not pro the idea of trading Cade, because if you do, you got to hope and bank that those assets you're getting back turn out to be as good as him. And it's not a guarantee that you get that. So I liked hearing that from him. I like the idea of him having the courage of being courageous and like aggressive with some of the playing that he wants to do in terms of making trades, taking on contracts. He's keeping the doors open for all options. And that's kind of where they should be. Even with the patience that they're asking for, you have to be aggressive in all assets this offseason. And I think they're going to do that based on what he was saying to us.
No, for sure, for sure. And I love that he honestly specifically mentioned Cade Cunningham, because I see a lot of talk from people because that extension is coming up where, is Cade worth the extension? Should they trade him now? And dude, on this roster right now, he's the best bet to become an all-star and potentially an all-NBA player. Like, he has that skill set. I feel like he has that drive. This is a guy that could really stand out from the rest. So I'm glad he kind of talked about that, kind of put it to bed a little bit, kind of showed a little belief in him,
right,
but also was realistic in saying, I don't know if he's a championship guy. I don't want to look that far down the line, but right now, this is a guy that you can actually build around, and I want to make his life easier. But we were talking about bad contracts, and the Pistons, they have what, $64 million in cap space. They can't spend all of that in free agency. So we have to look at bad contract players. So out of the bad contract players that are rumored to be on the move, like Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine, guys like that, who, in your opinion, makes sense for this team?
Both of those guys scare me. And there's really one name that's been coming up for me, and I know a lot of people don't like it. I don't care. I think he would be a fit here. I think it makes the most sense out of the guys that they've talked about. And I don't think his contract is as bad as the other two that you've mentioned, so it could make it a reasonable option. I like Kyle Kuzma coming over here. Like, I think I don't think he's again, if you're banking on him on being your number one scorer, then you're going to have a problem. But if he's your number two, like, I don't think that's a bad pickup at all. I think he's a very well-rounded scorer. He's gotten better and better every year since, being drafted and coming up under the Lakers. Again, it's a tough situation. Like, I don't like he puts up empty stats. I don't like that. That's not always players' fault. It's based on the team that they go to. And they say the same stuff about Cade. So I don't like that argument. I think Kuzma would be a tremendous addition here. And based on the players that you're trying to pick up, because people have talked about Brandon Ingram, he's on a 1-year contract. Like, that is a super turnoff to me. You should not be trying to make any kind of blow-up trades for a guy on 1 year. Because if the Pistons, let's say if they have you can call this a significant improvement, but if they have 25 to 30 wins but miss the playoffs, that's a step in the right direction. But is it a step in the right direction to keep a Brandon Ingram around? Not necessarily. I don't think that's a case. So if you're going to make that kind of a plunge, you do it for somebody with at least 2-3 years on their deal. So I like Kuzma. Having those local ties maybe makes it easier for him to want to stay instead of having to over talk or overpay somebody to stick around. He's my number one in that regard. I think he makes a lot of sense, and I think it would really pay off for everybody around. I don't think he's I don't think he would be the ball hog that people have talked him up to be. And if Cade is the star that we believe him to be, I think he'll be able to fall in line like we've seen before. I think he makes sense a lot.
I do like Kyle Kuzma. I'm also a huge fan of Brandon Ingram because I just really like his game. I really do. And
Yeah.
I think he would thrive next to a Cade Cunningham. And I also think Kyle Kuzma would thrive next to a Cade Cunningham. Because the two things that those players have not really played with throughout their careers is a true table setting point guard, a guy that's just
Right.
going to put them in the right spot, help their game out, put them in the spots where they can be efficient and, the best play to the best of their abilities. So I
Right.
like Kyle Kuzma. I'm one of those guys that's like, dude, bring me a guy that can give you 20 on any given night. The Pistons need that. We lack scoring. I don't really care so much about the defense because you get a rim protector that changes a lot of things for
Right.
this team. And it's not like Kyle Kuzma is really a traffic cone. This guy has played many roles and wore many hats in his young NBA career. He's been the go-to guy. He's been a role player. He's been on a championship team. I think he would be a great player to bring in for the Detroit Pistons. And I think Kyle Kuzma is one of those names you really have to keep a lookout for because the Detroit Pistons aren't bringing in any all-stars. That's just never been
Right.
the Detroit way. It's always been
Exactly.
these tier 2, tier 3 guys. But if you were to make a trade, and I hate to put you on the spot, but who would you trade for Kyle Kuzma?
Oh man. They have a lot of pieces that make sense that you can move over for them. I I'm not in love with at this point the Marcus Sasser draft pick. Like,
Okay.
I just don't think that's working out for them at all. He's not probably going to be the number one guy that you would put in a trade like that, but he's someone I think that could be included. Like, I just don't think that was a smart draft last season. People would throw around maybe like Ivy. I don't think the draft capital is not the strongest to have in these kind of conversations, but they do have players. We just saw the possibility of Quentin Grimes being a possible trade asset for other players. Like, they have pieces that they can move. It's going to be a tough conversation, especially if it's a Duren or an Ivy that come off the books. Would I be willing to part with one of those two? Maybe. It just depends what you bring back in return for them. Like, again, it's going to be some tough parting ways that's going to happen. For one of those two guys, I wouldn't trade Asar for it. Just because I don't think I think he shares too much value defensively, and you don't really have the ability to sacrifice that at this point. So I like Asar staying. I could see anybody else kind of being a little bit more expendable for a move to get a guy like Kuzma over in Detroit.
So let's say, because I'm cool with trading Marcus Sasser as well too. There was a Bleacher Report article a few weeks ago where it was Marcus Sasser to the Phoenix Suns for Damian Lee in the 22nd pick. I'm all for a trade like that because I'm with you. I like Marcus Sasser. I like what he brings to the table, but he's a 6'2" guard. I feel like you can find guys that provide what he provides. But let's just say the draft works out this way where Donovan Cleon, I don't know if you're a fan of his or not, but let's just say he's available at 5. Pistons say, you know what? He's our rim protector for the next 10 years. We're going to go him. And then they trade Jalen Duren for Kyle Kuzma. Would you be up for a trade like that? Is that something that you think could possibly be done?
I think it could be done. I like the benefit of bringing Kuzma at least back because you're getting a bona fide 20-point score in return.
Yeah.
I like Duren's upside still, but his defense is still it's so much to be desired that goes with it. Like, the rebounding is cool, the dunking is cool, like the athleticism is there when it's on display. But we've seen a lot of issues that kind of make you worry about him. His injuries are still a big problem with me. His ankle injuries, just I don't think you can undersell that, especially from what we've seen in just 2 years of his career. I don't like the idea of giving up on these players yet, but unfortunately, and I know Langdon talked about not rushing. While they don't want to rush, you're kind of in a tweener position where you can't wait too long. Like, you're not going to want Cade to be mad, like, going into this extension. You don't want, like, any kind of dysfunction or to continuously, repeatedly be in a top 5 position of drafting. Like, you want to show some improvement sooner or later. And I think it's going to take moving a guy like that. And if you were to get Kuzma in return while maybe having a guy like Klingon as his replacement, I think it makes sense in the world for where they're trying to go.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I have mentioned that a few times on past episodes that we are on Cade's timeline. Like you only,
Yes.
yeah, even though he's going into his fourth year, that extension's coming up. You really got to start figuring things out, whether it's the head coach and start building a competitive roster. It's fine to take a year of evaluating the young guys and figuring out, do they fit? Who should I trade? What's the market for them? I get all that. But in the meantime, you also have to add players that are going to make Cade's life easier. They're going to make him want to stay.
Right.
So I'm all for that. But you did mention the Tim Hardaway and Quentin Grimes trade. What are your thoughts on Quentin Grimes for Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Hate
Now,
it.
I'm
Hate
a
it.
well, I'm a
Hate it.
Michigan fan. And I
Hate it.
love Tim Hardaway
Hate
Jr.
it.
Okay.
Hate it. Hate it. I don't like it at all. And he's not. Yeah, I liked him in Michigan too. He was a dog. Him and Trey Burke. Like I love that backcourt. I thought they both were gonna be stars coming out of Michigan, but I didn't know. I don't like the idea of that. I'd rather stick with Grimes. He's a better defender. I think he has more upside as a shooter than what we saw last season. And Dallas doesn't have a pick to give away in that. And if you were to do a deal like that, so it's kind of a lateral guard movement to an extent to me, at least in terms of upside. And if you're not getting a pick back in return, if you maybe have to give one to Dallas, I don't like that idea at all. Like this has been a very common report of THJR coming over to Detroit, but I'm not a big fan of it for what you would have to give away to get him or what you would get in return. I'm not a big fan of the idea.
See, neither am I, just because I really like Quentin Grimes and I think he has an opportunity to actually start alongside Cade Cunningham. I love his skill set.
Yep.
Next to Cade, I think it could really work. Unfortunately, in the 6 games we saw of him in a Detroit Pistons uniform, it wasn't pretty. It was pretty brutal. So I'm in the school of thought where give him another year. Just give him another year in Detroit. See if he can get back to the New York Knicks days of like his second year in the league. That's what I want to see because even though I'm hoping, we'll talk about head coaches here in a little bit, even though I want a head coach that's like offensive minded, I still want defensive players on this team that are going to make it hard for the opposition to, get the ball in the hoop. So I'm out on this trade.
Yeah, they got a lot of guys that are just kind of one-sided players. And Grimes is a guy that can do both. Yes, he was really bad shooting, and I think that was a big effect that came from his injury. Dealing with that knee injury all season was really plaguing him, and it just never got better. So for me, I don't want to. I'm tired of them just bringing in guys that excel on one side of the court. You need guys that can expand and give you both at this point. And I think Grimes, again, especially as a veteran too, he just gives you way too much. I wouldn't pull the plug on him just yet.
Yeah, in 45 games with the Knicks before the trade, he averaged 4.7 3-point attempts and shot 36%. In 6 games with the Pistons on 4.7 attempts, he shot 14%. I'm believing that's an outlier. He can get back to the 36, 38% that he was showing in the New York Knicks.
Totally agree.
So Monty Williams has been fired. We won't go into too much detail because there's really nothing to say about it anymore. It was just a tough year. It was a long season, 14 wins, 28-game losing streak. It sucked. But we're just looking forward to the future. So Sean Sweeney, Micah Nori, JB Bickerstaff, and James Borrego, they will, I guess, all interview for the head coaching position. Those are the rumors that are out there. So who, in your opinion, is the front runner for this job?
I think at this point it's Borrego. I think he has I don't want to say he has the strongest resume, but I think he has the best familiarity based on where the Pistons are right now. With the season that he had with the Hornets back in 2021-22, where they went 43-39, top 10 offense. We saw improvements from LaMelo. We saw improvements with a lot of their young talent. And knowing that he was able to push and have direction offensively, be able to get the most out of your focal franchise point guard. And I think Cade is better than LaMelo anyway. I think that's a match that works. Like, I think he's a very good option for them. To me, if I were the Pistons, he would be at the top of my board. I don't think this next name that I'm going to bring up is an option, but Sam Cassell's another name that I think they should be talking about or at least looking into. He's been way too seasoned. He's done a very good job with veteran point guards and young guards. Like, he's done a good job with everybody that he's been in working with in terms of the franchise he's been on. And I think he would bring a lot of like that. Like Monty was a veteran coach, but I don't think his style really weaved and worked well with the young players. And we kind of saw that from the start. I think Sam Cassell's done a good job of, again, a big word that Langdon used at his presser was threading everybody together. I think Sam Cassell is that kind of coach, and I think he has that kind of personality and basketball IQ. To me, those are the top two names that I think the Pistons should be thinking about in this search.
I am really curious to why Sam Cassell has never, I know he's had interviews before, but like he's never gotten that opportunity. I'm just wondering why, but I'm in on you with James Borrego. That's my favorite candidate for this. And his final season in Charlotte, those 43 wins, LaMelo Ball was named an all-star for the first time in his career. I liked what he was able to do with them. And someone was reaching out to me and they were saying, well, James Borrego, he apparently has like a reputation. And again, I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if the person sharing it with me knew it as fact at all, but he said that he apparently has a reputation where he doesn't work well with young players. But see, I don't agree with that because you got 43 wins out of the team. I just think James Borrego, it was just a weird mix of personalities in Charlotte. You have LaMelo, you have Miles Bridges, you had Terry Rozier there, Gordon Hayward, you had all these different, Kyle Oubre was there for that season. You had all these guys there that have just different personalities that were on different timelines in their career. They all wanted different things. And I think James Borrego really did a masterful job of getting them all to be one unit and getting them to 43 wins. And I think with the personalities of like what we've heard about this young Pistons team, they fit with who he is as a coach. And I want a coach coming in here that's more offensive minded, because you can just hire an assistant defensive coach like a Dan Burke.
Right.
I just always throw his name out there because I know the Pistons defense looked a lot better in those 3 games before he left for personal reasons or whatever it was. But you can hire and bring in a defensive minded coach to sit alongside you with the bench, but also defense. Even you can have the best defensive coach in the world. And I know that Sean Sweeney is kind of known as like a young Tom Thibodeau or whatever. But if the players aren't giving you effort and they don't want to play on that side of the ball, who cares? So bring in a creative, offensive-minded coach that are going to maximize these guys' strengths. And I think that's what James Borrego brings to the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, I think and shout out to Jack Kelly. I got his stats on Twitter from the other day where he was talking about Borrego and what he did that year. They're 6th in 3-point percentage, 37%, 6th in attempts, 1st in shots at the rim. Like, I think that's significant, especially considering them just hiring Fred Vincent as well. They're not playing about shooting. Like, they see how bad and how big of a hole that is for this team. Like, that's why I think Fontecchio I think they'll get a deal done with him soon. Like, I think they're going to make sure like that's the number one thing that they're trying to get done. And considering, like, to me, I think the coaching is the most important thing that they need to lay up from this point. And I think Borrego is the right lead, again, based on what he's done with the Hornets, based on his track record with young talent. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that as well. Like the LaMelo came in kind of like as a guy that they looked at as he does his own thing. He doesn't really he's not really like coached. Like there was like picks at his discipline, and that kind of turned around pretty quick. We saw him look like a floor general for Charlotte. We really saw him even excel and like grow as a shooter too. Like his shot's kind of funky, but like it was working out for a little while he was under his tutelage. So I'm a fan of his. I think he works. And again, given Cade's upside, and I think he's better than LaMelo, I think you have that next great experiment right there. Like, I think Cade will be a great attraction for him. I think it makes perfect sense.
And also, he was that coach that sat LaMelo on the bench his rookie year and said, basically, you're going to earn it. So, he's used to dealing with volatile personalities, and he's more than comfortable of like putting a guy in his place, which I really think you need at the NBA level. So James Borrego really is my guy right now out of the candidates. So out of these names, and you can feel free, I mean, you did name someone else as well, but who else fits the idea of what Trajan Langdon is looking for in a head coach? He mentioned someone that is a good communicator, a collaborator, and someone that is passionate about developing players. Is there any other names that you can think of that kind of fit that idea of what Trajan Langdon is looking for?
I think Micah Nori would be a good pick for that as well. I think he's I think he should still be a name that they're mentioned with as well after what they did with Minnesota, especially after they just gave, their coach the mega $1 million extension he got. I think he should be somebody that's mentioned as well. I'm not super high on JB Bickerstaff. A lot of the big issue that teams or like the Cavs had with him was his lack of in-game adjustments. And I hate hearing that. Like, I don't like that at all. Like, I don't. Monty Williams literally was that problem with the Pistons. We've seen that too many times where they just kind of say, oh, we'll just let the young guys figure it out. No. These young guys need some direction. They need some discipline. They need some like assignments to understand what it takes to win. And just letting them go figure it out is not cutting it anymore. So I'm not super high on Bickerstaff for that exact reason. But I think those other three would be perfect in terms of player development. I really like Kenny Atkinson too. I'm mad he got taken away. But it makes sense. I understand. He was a hot target coming out of Golden State. But I think the other three are fantastic candidates based on what the Pistons are looking for.
Yeah, I like JB Bickerstaff, but the thing I'm concerned about is that even though he's had success at other teams, as a head coach, they've all been willing to get rid of him and find a replacement, because I feel like those teams feel as if JB Bickerstaff is not the coach to get them over the hump and deliver them to the promised land. So it feels like to me, like if you're a team, if the Pistons had a few more wins on Armani Williams and they were like, yeah, we're looking for someone else to kind of, move the needle a little bit more, maybe you bring in a JB Bickerstaff, I guess. But I feel like even if the Pistons hired him, he'd be here for like 3 seasons. He'd be like a bridge coach where you're always on the hunt for the next guy to take you further than he did. So, and again, we're talking about Cade's timeline, so I'm good on JB Bickerstaff. But how do you feel about the Detroit Pistons hiring a first-time head coach? That kind of concerns me a little bit. I know Sean Sweeney is a name that a lot of fans love from his work in Milwaukee when, Giannis, credits him for like helping him develop that killer mentality and helping him develop his game to become the player he is. But I'm kind of out on first-year coaches because I feel like there's a lot of pressure in Detroit to get this right. And I would rather have a guy that, he's already dealt with the pressure, and he kind of already has like his feet wet a little bit. But what are your thoughts on a first-year head coach?
If it was a first-year head coach, it really has to make sense. But this name got ripped apart before Monty got hired. But Kevin Ollie, to an extent, could be a name that would make sense in this kind of a situation, considering his connection with Asar Thompson, being a former player, a defensive minded coach when he was a player as well. I think those are the kind of instances where it would make sense. Like just trying somebody to try them, like someone threw out, like, I think he's a good coach, but like if you were to kick the tires on like a Jerry Stackhouse, that would kind of worry me a little bit just because of exactly what you said. This timeline is so sensitive right now. And granted, I give these guys a lot of credit because like Cade, Jaden Ivey, like these guys were very good at staying professional through the struggle. I don't know how much longer that's going to last. Like sooner or later, one of them is going to snap and I won't blame them a bit. So like this can't be a timeline that they just kind of like just treat as, oh, we can kick the can. No, you can't kick the can. This has to be a move that you get right. They don't have the ability to mess up or like take their time with seeing how things go. Bring in a Fred Vincent, who again, shooting coach, comes from a winning program, comes from like structure and order with the Pelicans. He makes sense and he helps. And maybe for a first-year coach, it would help to have him there. But again, based on the circumstances, if you really want to maximize Cade, you really want to bring out the best of the young guys, bringing in someone who's somewhat of a been there, done that, not like someone who's been there. Like, again, I understand why, because of the Monty Williams and Wade Casey thing, this didn't work out. But I think they need somebody with some kind of ability to connect with the youth while also teaching them what it means to be a winning program as well.
No, I 100% agree with that. And I was on the pin down last week and I was telling Wes and Blake, like, I want to coach, and I don't know if this makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me when I say it out loud. I want to coach that grew up in the way basketball is played today, like offensively, with all the spacing, with all the movement, with all the action, grew up in basketball where the way we're supposed to play defense. Like, it's different rules than it was 10 years ago,
Right.
So even just a couple of seasons ago, it's different. So like hiring a veteran, like I'm just throwing a name out there, like a Stan Van Gundy,
Right.
it would be like, that would be like a backwards move to me, just because that is a guy, even like a Mark Jackson, and like, no offense to him, I know what he did in Golden State, but he's been out of basketball for a while. And I
Right.
feel like that's a guy that's like really kind of, and just like all the older coaches, just stuck in their ways. It's going to work this way, or we're going to fail, this way. But,
Yeah, those first year, I mean, the reports worry me when I saw it, and I'm glad he's not coming here. No disrespect, good luck to him. But JJ Redick being a reported name here, that worried me. Like, no, I don't think it's gonna work in LA, but I get why he's there. LeBron, AD, veteran team, championship experience. It makes sense, so they can kind of coast him in while he's learning and coaching and teaching as well. The Pistons don't really have that. Again, their coach needs to be like their high voice on the bench, and like until Cade like proves and shows that he can be not just the alpha voice but a winning alpha voice, you're gonna need the coach to kind of be that leader for right now. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the first year coach idea. I don't think that would work.
Yeah, I do like what you said though too, like bringing in a coach that can connect with younger players. So that's why I thought Kevin Ali was a great candidate. I did want Charles Lee, but I
Yeah.
thought Kevin Ali, even though it's kind of back and forth on it, I'm like, he did have success in college. He's worked with Asar Thompson. He's a developmental guy, so I could see it ultimately working with a younger team than it did with Monty Williams. But hey,
Right.
that's here. And we're now. So
Right.
let's talk about some draft talk. So Trajan Langdon mentioned the possibility of trading back if the right deal is in place. What do you think the odds are of that happening?
I think it's very possible, man. I really do. I think there are a lot of teams that are trying to move up. Like there are teams like Portland, teams like Chicago, teams like Memphis, Utah. A lot of these teams seem like they have their eyes like linked in on one or two guys. Klingon is a high name that's being mentioned a lot. I could see them being a trade partner where the Pistons can move back and maybe get one of their guys that they have on their board. I don't think that's out. I don't think that's like a stretch or a hot take at all. I absolutely can see the Pistons being one of those few teams in that top 5, top 6 gap that comes down for the teams in the top 10 that are trying to get up and go get their guy. I absolutely can see that happening come tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the trade back. I have 2 teams that are really on my radar, and it's Memphis and Portland. I
Yeah.
love the possibility. I mean, not trading too far back down, like I've heard on some podcast, going somewhere in the teens, like actually out of the lottery. That's not something I want unless you're getting a real player back, which I
Right.
don't know who's going to do that in this draft. But if Donovan Cleon is there at number 5, like I like Memphis, even for a guy like Santi Aldama, trade back to the 9th spot, bringing a big like that
Right.
can stretch the floor. That's something that I like because I feel like you can get, whether it's maybe a Matas Buzelis or a Ron Holland or a
Mm-hmm.
Cody Williams at a 9, or even a Dalton Connect if that's the way you want to go. I
Mm-hmm.
also like Portland as another team, whether it's 7 or 14 to trade back with. If you could bring in someone like maybe Jeremy Grant, or I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Brogdon. I think he would really fit well next to Cade. I know he has some injury concerns,
Yeah.
but I know you already mentioned one team. Are there any other trades that you would, if you were the Pistons or in the front office, that you would be willing to call and trade back with?
Sacramento's another team I think that could possibly be in that mix. I think they're kind of in that like tweener stage where there's youth there, but they're also trying to make sure they can establish and fill in all the holes that they have. Like I can see them making a play for another big. I can see them making a play for another wing. Yeah, I can see Sacramento being in that mix as well. This is a very wide open job. Like I don't even think like the top 4, the top 2, like I don't think it's really anything that's like concrete and certain. Like we saw that with Cade when he came out. Like a lot of those names that went made sense. I don't think there's anything that's like certain or like on the books right now. So I feel like a lot of those teams that we mentioned could be, making a lot of calls. And I think the Pistons could be one of those target teams that they go for. It would make a lot of sense based on where they're at.
Dude, Sacramento would be a nice team because then you could bring in someone like a Kevin Herter who provides shooting, maybe even a
Right.
Harrison Barnes. I never even thought about Sacramento. That's actually not a bad team to roll with right there at
Yeah,
all.
Barnes could be a cheap filler type of player that they could use for like a year or two,
100%.
just to kind of smooth things over and learn what it takes to win. I wouldn't mind that at all.
So, with the hiring of shooting coach Fred Vincent, who we've mentioned on this podcast quite a few times already, do you think the Pistons could draft a wing with higher upside, say like a Ron Holland or a Buzelis or a Cody Williams, versus a safer pick like Dalton Connect?
I think it's possible. I think Holland kind of fits that mold. He kind of has like the explosive like build of like the Herb Jones, who we saw turn into a pretty good shooter, as of last year. We've seen that growth. We've seen Vincent have the ability to work on guys like Lonzo Ball, whose shot was broke when he came out shooting like I don't know what to call it, like a windmill. It was crazy, but I think I don't want to say it can open up the window of them being a little bit more aggressive because they know what his history is. But again, it's gotta work. It just has to work. And there is a lot of shooting around that range as well. I do think Connect makes sense. I really like Cody Williams. That's my guy. I really think he has high upside as that 3-and-D wing. Again, I don't think there's some similarity to say to his brother. Again, I think they are similar in some ways, but I think he could be the better shooter between the two. And like, I think those are, again, there's a lot of names, even Shepard from Kentucky. There's a lot of names that they could go after that would make sense in terms of adding that kind of shooting that they're looking for.
Yeah, I just think like I wonder even if Fred Vincent is like in the conversation with Trajan Langdon, or if like Langdon goes up to him and says, "Hey, look, I'm looking at Ron Holland. Let's watch some film on him, study his shot. I'm looking at it right now. It needs some work. It needs some help.
Mm-hmm.
Can you fix it to where he can be at league average or something like that? Is there a possibility that you could do that? I just wonder if there are conversations between Langdon and Fred Vincent on stuff like that. But I mean, I really do think because like at the beginning of this draft, like when we first started talking about it, after the season ended and we found out we were drafting fifth, I was thinking, dude, it's Dalton Connect no matter what. Like you have to go with Dalton Connect because he provides everything you need. He's an older player. There's not a ton of upside with him just because he is older, but like he provides something right now. And plus, the Pistons don't have any development staff in place, and that's something I've been begging for since I became a fan. So now that there are some guys in place, I'm thinking, dude, higher upside. This is like the real possibility. But you did mention Cody Williams, so is that your guy at number 5 for the Detroit Pistons?
That's my guy. Yeah, I would stay there and go after him. Because you're talking about, like, kind of sticking back to the question you were asking, the guys who have that high upside that maybe they can mold. They kind of already have that in Asar Thompson. And I don't know about bringing another guy that kind of has that same mold to do the exact same thing, because you don't need both of them to kind of be the same thing. Now, great, it would help, but if you're going to also add, wings in free agency, like there's reports about Tobias Harris. Like if you're trying to add guys like that, I don't think adding another project like like Holland to, again, plays kind of like Asar, I just don't really think that makes a lot of sense. Like you kind of got to get some guys that do different things. So to me, I like Cody Williams. He doesn't have to be a dominant, number one go-to kind of scorer. He's a guy that, again, we saw Monty just stick Asar in a corner for half the season, not half, more than half the season. You do it to Cody Williams, it makes more sense because he's dangerous and can make those kind of shots, at least has the history of making those kind of shots. So I'm a big fan of his. I think he has upside as a defender if he puts on a little bit more strength. That's who I'm really high on. I think he makes a lot of sense too.
Oh, man, if he gets like at 205, 210 pounds, he's going to be real scary because he was – his field goal percentage at the rim is like 73.9%. It's something insane. I'm like, I want to say 91 attempts at Colorado. It's just crazy. He's the second guy I want at number 5. Ron Holland is my guy just because, they didn't really have a point guard with the G League Ignite. He was kind of taking over that duty. So I just feel like maybe his self creation is really not there. But if you put him with a guy like Cade, who can create open looks for him, and Jaden Ivey can do the same thing, maybe that field goal percentage goes up a little bit more. Maybe that 3-point percentage gets into the 30s instead of being at 24%. That's what I think with Ron Holland. But I do want to ask you, I know I didn't put this in the prep sheet or anything, but like, who would be your surprise pick at number 5? And maybe a name we're not really looking for.
Well, I guess he wouldn't necessarily be a surprise because a lot of people have mentioned him. He would be surprising to me, though. Like, I think Reed Sheppard would be a surprise. Like, yeah. I don't think that would be, like, because I understand the upside. I understand his skill set. He is, good defensive instincts. He's a good shooter. He's a good kind of glue player to have. But they're getting to a point where they're, like, again, last season they had a bunch of centers that didn't really make sense, or there were a lot of centers that were young and had to play. You're putting him in that kind of same position with the guards because, again, Cade has to be your primary development. Jaden Ivey is going to have to still play. We don't know what they're going to do with Sasser. Grimes has to get back on the court. Even like a Troy Brown. Like, they have guys that they still got to figure out what they're going to do with. So I don't know if Sheppard would be like, I don't want to say he's not a smart addition. It makes sense, but it doesn't make for a clear picture on how they're going to finalize their roster at that point. So I feel like he will be kind of a surprise. I understand everybody's hype around him, but I'm a little weary about that. And I think that would be kind of a shock that I would maybe side eye a little bit if they were to draft until he proves me wrong. If so, I will give him his credit if he does.
Yeah, it would be kind of, I mean, I am a fan of Reed Sheppard. I don't think he's going to shoot 52 or 53% in the NBA because that's just godlike and nobody does that. It'll probably be somewhere in the 30s just because of the length and the athleticism in the NBA. But it would be a little concerning if I'm playing devil's advocate to draft a small guard that I think is under 6'3". Right. Even though I think with Cade's size, Asar's size, Simone Fontecchio's size, you could get away with it, but you still need a rim protector at that 5 spot to really hide his deficiencies as a basketball player, which is just his size. I mean, the skill is there. It's just he's 6'2", and I mean, like it's hard for small guards to really be great in the NBA. You got to be real special. So the Detroit Pistons have $60 million in cap space. I'm positive some of that cap space will be used in a trade. But with the remaining cap space, who do you think the Pistons will spend it on free agency? What are some names that you are hearing that are linked to the Detroit Pistons?
It's a lot of smoke to the names that's been mentioned. Najee Marshall is absolutely somebody they have in sight. Tobias Harris is somebody that they have in sight. He has his family ties. He played for the team. They need wing help. He's a versatile scorer. I know people are terrified of what they saw with him in the postseason, and people are worried about what his second go around in Detroit would look like. But based on what this roster looks like, I think he does make sense. Now, granted, you don't want him being your number one scorer. Like, you're not trying to go to Tobias in the clutch against the playoff team. Like, that's not going to happen. But Cade needs some shooting, man. And I don't think Tobias is a great defender, but there were stretches where I saw him improve and look a little bit better than he has in the past. Like, I think he makes sense. He plays the 3 or the 4. I think he will be helpful. Another name I really like is Malik Beasley. I think he's somebody that could give some good quality veteran depth to that backcourt. He's a good shooter, a good defender. These young players need to start learning from some veteran defenders who know how to defend without fouling. Like, we see a lot of that from Asar. We see a lot of that even from Duren, who's a big. Cade had that problem his first couple years, even though refs just hate him. Jaden Ivey, same thing. Like, they just need to find a way to defend without their heads and without getting attention from the refs. And I think having those kind of veteran players like a Beasley would help them a lot. And I think Najee Marshall as well. I really like his upside. Given a bigger role on a team like Detroit would make sense. It's not like it's like, to me, like people were talking about like guys like Malik Monk coming here. He would have a bigger role, but that bigger role is going to kill the development of your young players. I don't think that bigger role for a Najee Marshall is going to knock off or deter the development of Asar. It's not going to deter the development of Ivy or Cade. It's going to help those guys. It's going to make defense easier for Jalen Duren to rotate and get over to that rim. So I think those 3 are probably the more fitting pieces that they could use Because again, you're based on the market, it's a lot of big names. You're not getting any of them.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. You're going to have to get the veteran complementary pieces to help Cade become that star that we think he can be.
See, I really like Malik Beasley as well. And I mentioned him on X, and people are like, Malik Beasley. And I'm like, dude, he shot like 46% from three. How do you not want that?
Dude.
I think it was from like the left or right corner or something. But I really like Malik Beasley. I love Lonnie Walker, shot 38% from three on around 5 attempts per game. He can play defense. He's a killer in transition. I really like him. I'm actually kind of a fan of Gary Harris as well, too. I know he was rumored, and I know that his numbers kind of took a hit, but he wasn't really a vocal point with the Magic anymore at that point. But someone that could help establish the culture, bring it in there. Huge fan of Najee Marshall as well. I think there's a lot more to his game. He was just buried on a good, talented wing, depth for the New Orleans Pelicans. But out of the big men, like you see it on X and you see it on social media, we're all talking about Nick Claxton and Isaiah Hartenstein. If you can pick one of those guys, who would you sign to play for the Detroit Pistons?
Man, honestly speaking, okay, so I'm gonna answer your question.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one of the two, I would probably get Claxton just because I love his defensive prowess. I think he's in that defensive player of the year conversation each year or for the past few seasons for a reason. But honestly, bro, I wouldn't sign either of them. I don't like the idea of okay, if you don't want to start Duren or if you just think Duren needs to take a step back, I get it. But if you're going to replace him with somebody who does something different than what you already think he's going to become. Hartenstein's not really a shooter. Claxton's not much of a shooter. They don't really create their own offense. They're not relied on like that to be those kind of players. So, and Duren's the exact same kind of way. So if you're going to add a center and if you're going to try to give a different look, you don't go get a guy that's older and could basically become what we think Duren could be down the line. Like, I don't think that makes a lot of sense in terms of roster building. I think if you're gonna get a 5, go find a 5 that can shoot and play defense, or shoot and is working on their defense. Don't go get another guy that lives in the paint, sets picks, and like struggles with like rotating and helping like offensively. Like I don't think that really helps based on what they're trying to find. Like you need to find floor spaces for Cade. You need to find guys that open up like the lanes for them to attack, even for Jaden Ivey to get to the rim. Like if you want their numbers to increase, you're not going to add guys like that who are going to clog that paint for them. So if it were up to me, I wouldn't sign either of them. If I had to get one of the two, I would probably go for Claxton just because of his defense.
I do like his defense and the versatility that him and Isaiah Stewart could share on that side of the floor. Like, I really think that's kind of great. But just to play devil's advocate and give you a little pushback, like the thing that concerns me about Jalen Duren is one, the defensive stuff, but offensively, in order for the lack of defense to be minimized, he really has to become somewhat of an offensive hub. You know what I'm saying? Like he has to be a guy that's either taking 15-foot jumpers or a guy that you can actually run the offense through, which I don't think you can. And I know that some fans are like, well, we've seen a little bit of like the Bam Adebayo. I just think it was a bad team. He was experimenting and throwing some stuff out there. I don't really know if that's really a part of his game or not. But my thing with Cade and my thing with the big man is he elevates bigs. Like we've seen him do with Marvin Bagley. We've seen him do with James Wiseman. Him and Jalen Duren, they have a nice little repertoire going on between the two of them. And I think he can replicate that with a Nick Claxton or an Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, again, if Jalen Duren's only going to be a screen setter and rolling to the rim, catching lobs and finishing around the rim, you get that with Nick Claxton and Isaiah Hartenstein. But you also get that anchor in the middle that can, be the defensive guy for like 8 years in the NBA. Like that's what you're getting with those guys. I don't know if you're getting it with Jalen Duren.
A big problem that I saw with Duren last year, and again, I signed a lot of this to Monty Williams. He's huge. He's a huge guy. And I understand the pick and roll dynamic between him and Cade. So we spent a lot of time on the perimeter, operating with Cade. But when he wasn't, there were so many sets that they ran where it's Cade on the wing, Duren on the top of the key, and then he's taking the ball and he's trying to throw entry passes to Isaiah Stewart, who's 6'7". Like, what are you thinking? You have baby Dwight Howard that you're keeping on the perimeter. And his passing declined. His ball handling declined. He was turning the ball over a lot. He wasn't really like crisp as we saw him with like some of his like upside with Memphis or even in his first season. Like he took a real step back. And I'm not putting a lot of that on him just because it felt like he was playing out of position. And going again back to the coaching, we need to make sure the coach puts them in their proper strengths, or at the very least, if you want to make sure that they're developing, make sure they're developing in the areas that you need them. Put him on the block. Man, we just saw Jalen Duren go from what, a 50% free throw shooter to a 70-80% free throw shooter. So even if he's not getting his shots in, he's going to the line and he's knocking down 70-75%. That's a W. And you didn't even try to take advantage of that. Monty, I don't want to make this a Monty rant, but he did such a disservice to this team in terms of their development. That has to change. So if we do see that from Duren, that has to be a focus. Put him on the block, make him develop and use that strength that we all see on display.
And since I don't believe the Pistons are going to be good next year anyways, I'm hoping for 24 wins. Right. Give me a coach that's going to let, even though I was just kind of saying some stuff about Duren being like, I don't want to see him do the Bam Adebayo stuff, but I wouldn't mind seeing a coach put him in a position where he can start shooting some 15-foot jumpers, establish some confidence. Because again, if he's not going to be that defensive player, dude, try to maximize him offensively. Let him be one of the guys along with Cade Cunningham where you can give him the ball and he can just go get you a bucket inside the arc. Like, you know, I love him being able to back down the basket. He's a monster right near the rim, but show me a little bit more offensively where you can shoot it. You may, develop like a Tim Duncan bank shot or something like that. Something, just give me something like that from Duren. I will not complain about the defense. And then we can just bring Isaiah Stewart off the bench to be the backup 5. So what are your odds that, I'm just going to stick with the big men, but what are your odds that Nick Claxton or an Isaiah Stewart or Isaiah Hartenstein actually become a Detroit Piston? Like, what would you put that out of? Like, what would the odds be?
I'm going to go. It's not fun to say 50-50. I'm not going to 50-50. I'll give you a little juicier to that. I'm going to say 60-40. I'm going to say 60 no, 40 yes to one of those two. Okay. I think, again, Langdon did a good job of speaking, and because, be clear, the players are listening to this stuff. You're not going to say, yeah, let's tear everything down, let's get some real players in. He's not going to say that. But I think he understands what happened on the court, and I think he understands the timeline of where this team is. If you can openly speak to wanting, like he openly said, we want to put the right players around Cade to bolster his development. That's word for word. So if you want to do that, you're going to have to be bold and aggressive to do so. Again, I think having Claxton brings in some help offensively, at least setting a screen as a veteran. And then defensively, it takes pressure off Cade from having to be, like, there were spots and times where he had to be like your second defender, and you don't really want to do that with him. You want him on the court as much as possible because he affects the game on both sides as a defender and as your floor general. So I'm gonna go 60-40. I don't think they want to give up so quickly on those guys. Like, I think they want to maybe give Duren and Ivy a little bit more time. Maybe by the trade deadline, we've rediscussed this and it's a little bit more concrete of where they're going to go. But I think as of right now, if you're preaching patience, I don't think, because again, if you bring in one of those guys, they're not coming off the bench. Like, that's just not going to happen. I don't think so. So I think it would make most sense, and based on what he said, for them to take that patient route. And I just don't think bringing in one of those guys like kind of feeds into that plan for me.
No, I mean, it makes sense for what you said. Like, if you are preaching patience and you want to evaluate the young guys, like, you don't bring in a Nick Claxton or an Isaiah Hartenstein, to be the guy in the middle. I mean, now if they were like up and coming players, maybe, and like you could see them battling with Duren or something, I don't know, maybe, but I like your odds, but also it would have been all right if you said 50-50. I would have totally respected it.
I wanted to get spicy for you, man. I got to give you something up here. I'll make it happen.
Dude, I appreciate that. But we're closing in on an hour. So, Eric, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell everybody where they can find you and, just support your work.
Lance, you the man, bro. I really appreciate you having me on, man. Everybody else, too, Piston fans, I appreciate your time. You can check out all my work. I do a lot of writing covering the Pistons on Clutch Points. So hit me up on there, clutchpoints.com. You can tune in to me on AM 1270 Sports Rap Radio every Sunday, 10 a.m. to 12. So if you just get to church or if you just get out of church, you need somebody to tune into, I'm your guy. We do have streaming coming up as well. I know people are complaining about, oh, it's AM. Trust me, we're working on it. We got streaming on the way. We're working to make it a little bit easier for you guys. Also have my own YouTube channel, Top Title Sports. You can check me out on there. Talk sports, working in some hip hop talk, some wrestling if you're a WWE fan. You know, I like to try to get a little free with that on there. So, you know, I got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm trying to be active this year. Lance, I appreciate you for having me on, man. It really means a lot.
Yeah, hopefully this is not the only time you come on because, like, dude, I
Here,
really
man.
enjoyed listening to you, man, for
Thanks,
real.
man.
Yeah, and I really do like your work, man. But thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do me a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and hit the follow button. After you hit the follow button, rate with 5 stars and tell me who you want free agency. But more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.